I served in the army for 12 years, did 2 tours in Afghanistan, and came back with more than just memories. A roadside bomb left me with a back injury that still haunts me to this day. After getting medically discharged, I thought I'd seen the last of battles. Little did I know, I was about to face a whole new kind of war, this time with bureaucracy. It was about 4 years ago when it all went down. I was living with my wife in a small town trying to adjust to civilian life. The nearest Veterans Affairs hospital was a good 2 hours away, but we had a small Veterans Affairs clinic just 10 minutes from our house. Not that it mattered much. That clinic was about as useful as a screen door on a submarine when it came to real emergencies. So there I was, sound asleep at 2:30 in the morning when suddenly it felt like someone was trying to carve out my insides with a rusty spoon. The pain was so bad I could barely breathe, let alone move. My wife, bless her heart, somehow managed to get me into the car and drove like a bat out of hell to the nearest emergency room. While I was busy trying not to pass out from the pain, my wife was dealing with the paperwork. The front desk lady asked about health insurance, and my wife explained that I was a veteran. The lady then assured us that she would send the bill to the Veterans Affairs and told us not to worry about it. I remember thinking, well, at least that's one less thing to worry about. Fast forward 4 months and I get this call out of the blue. A guy from a collection agency told me I had an outstanding medical bill that needed to be paid immediately. When I told him there must be some mistake, he insisted there wasn't and warned me about consequences if I didn't pay. Great, just great. I called the hospital and they told me the Veterans Affairs had denied the claim. Apparently, they'd sent the bill to the wrong address and now I was in collections. Fan-freaking-tastic. So I called up the Veterans Affairs department that handles outside payments. The guy there told me that according to their records, I had access to a Veterans Affairs facility 10 minutes from my house, so there was no need to go to a regular hospital. I tried to explain that it was just a clinic, not a hospital, and that it was closed at 2:30 in the morning. But he kept insisting that I should have gone there first. No matter how many times I repeated that they were closed and not equipped for emergencies, he wouldn't budge. In the end, he just told me I'd have to pay for the visit. I was fuming. Here I was, a guy who'd put his life on the line for his country, and now I was getting the runaround over a medical bill. That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. I actually Googled how to contact the White House. Turns out you can just call them up. So I did. The White House operator answered and asked how she could direct my call. I explained that I was a disabled veteran needing to file a complaint about the Veterans Affairs. She immediately connected me to the White House Veterans Complaint Department. After explaining my situation twice more, I finally got to speak to the director. She was not happy about what had happened to me. She apologized for the trouble I'd been through and assured me she'd take care of it personally. The next morning, I got a call from Mr. No Common Sense himself. He apologized for the misunderstanding and told me that my bill would be fully covered. He even gave me his direct contact information in case I received any more calls or bills about this matter. In the end, it turned out to be kidney stones. Painful, sure, but not nearly as painful as dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. I guess sometimes you gotta go straight to the top to get things done. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like the satisfaction of knowing you've outmaneuvered the system that was trying to screw you over. I've always been close to my dad. He's been a cop for over 20 years, but I've never really seen him in action. Sure, I've heard stories from his colleagues at barbecues and stuff, but to me, he's just my dad. The guy who helps me with my homework and takes me fishing on weekends. Today was supposed to be a normal day. We were at the mall to buy me some new jeans because I'd hit a growth spurt recently. I was excited because shopping with Dad usually meant we'd grab some food court grub afterward. As we were heading that way, I spotted my favorite pretzel place, Auntie Anne's. I eagerly asked my dad if we could stop for a pretzel, practically begging him. Dad agreed, saying he could use a snack himself. We got in line, and that's when things started to get weird. This guy in front of us was making a fuss about his order. He complained that his food wasn't what he asked for and demanded another one. The employee tried to help, politely asking him to step aside so other customers could order, but the guy refused, insisting he wouldn't move until he got what he wanted. Then, to everyone's shock, the guy pulls out a cigarette and lights up right there in the mall. My dad, being who he is, couldn't just stand by. He approached the man and asked what the problem was. The guy looked at my dad like he was a piece of gum stuck to his shoe. My dad isn't very tall, only about 5'7", and he was in casual clothes. So I guess the guy didn't find him very intimidating. He dismissively told my dad to mind his own business and go back to his place in line. My dad then informed the guy that smoking was strictly prohibited on mall grounds. Instead of answering, the guy blew a cloud of smoke right in my dad's face. I could see my dad's patience wearing thin, but he kept his cool. He asked the man once more to put out the cigarette. The guy mockingly asked if my dad was a cop, laughing like he'd just told the funniest joke ever. My dad opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, the guy shoved him hard. I stood there frozen in shock and embarrassment. I mean, this was my dad getting pushed around in public. But then something amazing happened. As a guy went to punch my dad, my old man ducked under his arm, wrapped him up around the waist, and took him down to the ground like a pro wrestler. In seconds, he had the guy in handcuffs. My dad started reciting the Miranda rights to the guy, listing off his charges. As he did this, I noticed mall security rushing over. They looked as surprised as I felt. The charges my dad listed included failure to abide by an officer's demand, assault on a peace officer, and disorderly conduct. The guy's face went from angry to scared real quick when he realized he'd just assaulted an actual police officer. As security took him away, I heard him start pleading, suddenly realizing the gravity of his actions and trying to find a way out of the situation. My dad just shook his head and turned back to me. He straightened his shirt and gave me a little smile, asking if I still wanted that pretzel. I nodded, still in awe of what I'd just witnessed. As we got back in line, people around us started clapping. Some even came up to shake my dad's hand and thank him. I've got to admit, I felt pretty cool standing next to him. While we waited for our pretzels, I asked my dad how he managed to stay so calm. He explained that it came from years of practice, emphasizing the importance of keeping a level head in tense situations. He admitted with a hint of satisfaction that taking the guy down felt pretty good. We laughed and I realized I was seeing my dad in a whole new light. He wasn't just my dorky dad anymore. He was a real-life hero. As we sat down to enjoy our hard-earned pretzels, I couldn't stop grinning. I told my dad how proud I was to be his son. He ruffled my hair and smiled, expressing that he'd never been prouder to be my dad. As we finished our snack, I saw the guy being escorted out of the mall by actual uniformed officers. He looked miserable. I mean, who lights up in a mall and then assaults someone for calling them out? Karma, I guess. That day at the mall turned out to be way more exciting than I ever expected. What started as a simple shopping trip ended up being a day I'll never forget. It taught me that my dad's job isn't just about writing tickets or filling out paperwork, it's about protecting people, even when he's off duty. And let me tell you, knowing your dad is a real-life superhero, that's pretty cool. I grew up in a family that wasn't my own by blood, but they took me in and made me one of their own. My adoptive dad ran a locksmith business, and from a young age, I was learning the tricks of the trade. It wasn't just a job for us, it was our life. Every day after school and on weekends, I'd be out there with my old man picking locks and making keys. He was a tough guy, but fair. He taught me that our work wasn't just about opening doors, it was about trust. People trusted us with their homes, their businesses, their most private spaces. We took that seriously. As I got older, I started taking on more responsibility. By the time I was 16, I was handling emergency calls on my own. It was a big deal being trusted like that. I felt proud, like I was really contributing to the family. One rainy night, I got a call that would teach me a lesson I'd never forget. It was about 1 a.m. and I was just dozing off when our emergency line rang. I picked up still groggy. I answered the phone, introducing our family locksmith service and asking how I could help. The caller explained that he was locked out of his car and needed someone to unlock it. I asked what kind of car it was. Still trying to wake up fully, he told me it was a new Cadillac. Knowing exactly what tools I'd need for the job, I told him I could be there in about an hour and quoted him $125 for the emergency service. I asked if that was okay. The caller impatiently agreed, telling me to just get there. I got dressed, grabbed my tools, and headed out into the storm. The rain was coming down in sheets, making it hard to see, but I knew the city like the back of my hand. I made it to the location in just over 30 minutes. The guy was standing there, huddled under an awning. He looked annoyed, like I was late or something. I got out of my van and walked over. I greeted him and identified myself as the locksmith, asking if the Cadillac was his. He confirmed it was his car, sounding annoyed and telling me to hurry up and open it. I nodded and got to work. It was a simple job really. Took me less than a minute to pop the lock. I opened the door and turned to the guy with a smile. I told him the job was done and reminded him of the $125 fee we had agreed on. The guy looked at me like I'd just insulted his mother. He protested the price, saying it only took me 30 seconds and offering to pay just $50. We'd agreed on the price over the phone. I'd driven out here in the middle of the night, in a storm, and this guy was trying to stiff me. I tried to explain that we had agreed on $125 and that the price covered the emergency service, my time, and my expertise. He scoffed at the mention of expertise, claiming a monkey could do the job and insisting on paying only $50. That's when something in me snapped. All those years of my dad teaching me about pride in our work, about fairness, about standing up for yourself, it all came rushing to the surface. I decided to show him just how easy it was. I reached in, grabbed the keys off the seat, and locked the car again. I told him that if it was so simple, he could do it himself. The guy's face turned red. He started sputtering and cursing. Finally, he agreed to pay the original $125 and demanded I open the car. I shrugged and unlocked the car again, but now I was feeling a bit mischievous. I informed him that the price was now $250 since I had unlocked it twice. He refused to pay that amount. I simply responded, "Suit yourself," and locked the car again. By now, the guy was practically foaming at the mouth. He threatened to call another locksmith. I calmly explained that my dad was the president of the local locksmith association and anyone who showed up would charge more than I was, especially at this hour. He then threatened to call the cops. I told him to go ahead, so he did. And when the cops showed up, I explained the situation calmly. They listened, then turned to the guy. The cop laid out two options for the man: pay the locksmith or break a window. The guy protested, pointing out the rain and calling the idea crazy. The cop simply reiterated that he should pay me. The guy grumbled and cursed but finally agreed. I unlocked the car for the third time. I then informed him that the total was now $375. When he asked why, I explained it was $125 for each time I unlocked it and specified that I only accepted cash. The guy looked like he was about to explode, but with the cops standing there, he didn't have much choice. He stomped off to the ATM down the street and came back with a wad of 20s. As I counted out the cash, I couldn't help but feel a little smug. My old man would be truly proud. I had just left a friend's house after a long night of catching up and maybe having one too many drinks. We hadn't seen each other in ages, and what was supposed to be a quick dinner turned into hours of reminiscing and laughter. By the time I looked at my phone, it was way past midnight and I knew I had a bit of a drive ahead of me. As I got into my car, I could feel the sleep buzz from the alcohol, but I was confident I was okay to drive. I probably should have called a ride share, but I live in a pretty rural area and the fares can be ridiculous at that hour. Plus, I had work in the morning and I needed my car. So there I was, cruising down the highway at about 65 to 67 kilometers per hour in a 60 zone. Where I'm from, cops usually don't bother you if you're within 10 over the limit. I was feeling pretty good, windows down, music up, just enjoying the quiet night. Everything was fine until I got closer to my neck of the woods. The roads start to wind a bit more, switching between single and double lanes. I'm on one of those single lanes, still going about 10 over, when I notice this pickup truck in my rearview mirror. This truck comes up behind me fast, then slams on the brakes, practically kissing my bumper. I thought to myself that maybe they didn't realize how close they were getting, so I speed up a little, hitting about 70. But nope, they're still right on my tail. I looked in the mirror again, and I see this woman's face all scrunched up and angry. She's so close I can practically count her eyelashes. For the next 5 minutes, all I can see in my rear view is her grill and her rage-filled expression. Now I'm already tired and feeling a little rough from the drinks earlier. The last thing I need is to be worrying about this lady causing an accident because she doesn't understand the concept of a safe following distance. I'm about ready to pull over and let her pass when my navigation app chimes in, warning me about a police officer reported up ahead. That's when I got an idea. If this woman wants to play games, I'll give her a game she won't forget. I start to gradually slow down, easing off the gas until I'm going exactly 60, right at the speed limit. This woman loses it. She's inching even closer if that's even possible. I can see her in my mirror, yelling and gesticulating wildly. She starts flashing her high beams at me, like some kind of demented Morse code telling me to go faster. I keep this up for another minute, watching her get more and more worked up. My nav app tells me the cop is less than a kilometer away. That's when I put on my turn signal and start to pull over to the side of the road, moving as slowly as I possibly can without coming to a complete stop. The woman in the truck sees her chance and floors it. As she zooms past me, she sticks her hand out the window, middle finger extended high and proud. I watch her truck disappear over the hill, easily going way more than 10 over the limit now. I pull back onto the road, get up to about 70, and crest the hill. And there it is, those beautiful flashing lights. I slow down to the speed limit as I approach, and sure enough, it's my friend from earlier, pulled over on the shoulder. As I pass by, I can't resist. I slow down just a bit more, lean out my window, and return her one-fingered salute. The look on her face as she realizes it's me is pure madness. I drive on, chuckling to myself. But the best part, as I round the next bend, I see another cop car, lights flashing, pulling out onto the road. Looks like my speedy friend is in for a double whammy tonight. I finally make it home feeling pretty pleased with myself. As I'm getting ready for bed, my phone buzzes. It's a text from my buddy on the force. He tells me about an entitled woman they just pulled over who tried to blame her speeding on some jerk who was driving too slow. He adds that she got lippy and earned herself a second ticket for disorderly conduct. I reply, expressing my belief in the situation and my satisfaction at helping serve some justice tonight. My cop friend responds with surprise, realizing it was me involved in the incident. He thanks me for the assist and wishes me a good night's sleep. I go to bed with a smile on my face, knowing that sometimes karma needs a little nudge in the right direction. I've always been fascinated by the world of high-end audio equipment, but as a college student on a tight budget, I couldn't afford the real deal. That's where my half-brother came in handy. He lives in Thailand, a place known for its impressive replicas of branded goods. When he visited last month, I asked him to bring me some fake Beats by Dre headphones. They're not the real thing, obviously, but they sound pretty decent for the price. A few days after my birthday, I decided to treat myself to some new games. I had a bunch of Best Buy gift cards from my friends, so I headed there to do some shopping. I picked out 7 games, mostly older titles that were on sale for about $10 each. As I was about to pay, I realized I'd left my gift cards at home. Annoyed with myself, I decided to put the games back where I found them. I can't stand people who just leave stuff lying around the store. I had my new headphones on, blasting some music by this awesome Mongolian band called The Who. I was lost in thought, trying to remember where I might have left those gift cards, when suddenly someone yanked my headphones off my head and roughly grabbed my shoulder, almost knocking me over. The woman started yelling at me, accusing me of working there and ignoring her. She complained about my loud music and called it the worst customer service ever. I was shocked and tried to explain that I didn't work there, asking for my headphones back. I told her that even if I did work there, she couldn't treat people like that and suggested she could have just tapped me on the shoulder. She got even angrier, telling me not to lecture her. She insisted she saw me restocking games and demanded I show her where to find games for her nephew. I repeated that I didn't work there and told her to find an actual employee. I also asked her to stop yelling at me, pointing out that I wasn't deaf. The woman continued to shout, saying she could yell all she wanted if this was how I treated customers. She threatened to get my manager and have me fired. By this point, we'd drawn a small crowd, but nobody stepped in to help. I'd had enough. I shouted back at her, calling her stupid and emphasizing again that I didn't work there. I explained I was just putting back some games because I forgot my gift cards at home. Finally, all the commotion caught the attention of an actual manager. The woman's eyes lit up when she saw him approaching. She exclaimed that a manager had arrived and threatened that I would learn my lesson about how to behave. Before I could react, she threw my headphones on the ground and stomped on them, shattering them completely. The manager asked what the problem was. The woman immediately started lying, claiming I had ignored her while listening to loud music, told her to get lost when she tapped my shoulder, and threw my headphones at her when she asked about games for her nephew. I quickly countered her lies, explaining that I was minding my own business when she assaulted me, thinking I worked there. I told the manager that when I tried to explain, she got even ruder and then deliberately smashed my headphones. The woman continued to lie, telling the manager not to listen to me. She demanded he fire me and call the police, claiming I could have hurt her with the headphones. The manager calmly explained that I didn't work there and that he had seen her throw down and step on the headphones. He mentioned they had cameras everywhere to verify what happened. The woman's face went pale and her voice started shaking. The manager apologized to me and asked if I wanted him to call the police. I agreed, saying it was only fair since she had wanted to get me in trouble with the cops. The woman quickly changed her tune, offering to apologize and pay for the headphones if we could forget about calling the police. I asked if she had $300 on her. She protested, saying she'd only agreed to pay for the headphones and apologize, not give me $300. I explained that some headphones, like Beats by Dre, are very expensive, costing nearly $280 new. I told her I deserved the full price of a new pair, plus extra for the trouble she'd caused. I gave her the choice between dealing with the police and small claims court or paying me $300 to end it there. She reluctantly agreed to pay the $300, begging us not to call the police as she couldn't afford to get in trouble with them. She handed over the money and mumbled something about taking anger management classes. I suspect this wasn't her first rodeo, and she's probably there on a judge's orders. Hopefully, between this expensive lesson and those anger management classes, she'll think twice before treating people like that again. I've always been an average student, mostly pulling C's in my classes. Math was my weakest subject, so when I ended up in Mrs. Karen's algebra class, I knew I was in for a rough time. From day one, Mrs. Karen made it clear she had no patience for students who struggled. And boy, did I struggle. Every time I raised my hand to ask a question, she'd roll her eyes and make some snide comment. She'd often call me the slow one and act surprised that I had another question. When I tried to explain that I was just trying to understand, she'd dismissively tell me to try harder, saying she didn't have time to explain everything twice. This went on for months. I tried talking to the principal, but Mrs. Karen had been teaching at the school for over a decade and was practically untouchable. They'd send someone to observe her class and suddenly she'd be on her best behavior. As soon as the observer left, it was back to the usual torment. One day, I'd had enough. I went to the electronics store and bought a small recorder. For the next few weeks, I recorded every insult she threw my way. Sometimes I'd even ask extra questions just to get more material. Then came the day that pushed me over the edge. I asked what I thought was a simple question about the problem we were working on. Mrs. Karen's response was brutal. She declared that in her 10 years of teaching, my question was the single dumbest she'd ever heard from anyone. The whole class went silent. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. Without a word, I packed up my things and left. Being 18, I was allowed to sign myself out, so I went straight to the nurse's office and headed home. That night, I compiled all the recordings into one long audio file. The next day, I marched into the principal's office. I told him I needed him to listen to something. When he asked what it was about, I simply said it was about Mrs. Karen and asked him to listen. I played the first few clips. The principal's eyes widened and he quickly stopped the recording. He told me we needed to have a formal meeting about this and asked if I could come back the next day with my parents. The next morning, I found myself in a room with the principal, vice principal, some school board members, and even the school resource officer. Mrs. Karen sat across from me, looking smug as ever. The principal asked to hear what I brought. I hit play on the recorder, and for the next 15 minutes, the room was filled with Mrs. Karen's voice, spewing insult after insult. I watched as the administrators' faces changed from annoyance to shock to outright anger. Mrs. Karen's smug expression melted away, replaced by horror as she realized what was happening. When it was over, the principal turned to me. He thanked me for bringing this to their attention and told me I could go back to class. As I left, I caught Mrs. Karen's eye. She was crying, but I couldn't find it in me to feel bad. I just gave her the biggest, most satisfied smile I could muster. The next week, Mrs. Karen was gone. Word spread quickly, and suddenly, I was a hero who'd taken down the school tyrant. I later found out that not only was she fired, but the district had blacklisted her. No school in the area would touch her with a 10-foot pole. Some might say I went too far, but I disagree. For months, I dreaded going to school because of her. She made me feel stupid and worthless. Teaching isn't just about knowledge. It's about patience and respect. And if you can't give that to your students, maybe you shouldn't be teaching at all. I'm just a guy who loves making music. Started out playing gigs in small bars. Then somehow my songs caught on and suddenly I'm topping charts and doing world tours. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful. But fame comes with a price. At first, the fan mail was cool. People sharing how my music touched their lives, asking for autographs, that kind of thing. But then this one person started sending letter after letter. They were intense, talking about how we were meant to be together, how she understood me like no one else. I tried to brush it off, but the letters kept coming. One day, I'm chilling at home when my phone rings. It's my dog Walker freaking out. He tells me my dog is gone, swearing he only turned his back for a second. I ask him what happened and if he saw anyone suspicious. He mentions there was a woman hanging around earlier, but he thought she was just another fan trying to get a glimpse of my place. He apologizes profusely. I was about to call the police when my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. The message said they had my dog and demanded I meet them at the park in 30 minutes if I wanted him back. They insisted I come alone. I knew I should have called the cops, but I was worried about my buddy. So I went. When I got to the park, I saw her. She was sitting on a bench holding my dog's leash. As I got closer, I realized I recognized her from some of the selfies she'd sent in her letters. I approach her, asking if I can have my dog back. She gets excited, exclaiming that it's really me and that she knew I'd come. She says we're finally meeting. I try to reason with her, telling her I don't know what's going on, but that this isn't okay. I ask her to give me my dog so we can talk. She dismisses the idea of talking, saying we're way past that. She tells me she has so much to show me. She lets go of the leash, and my dog runs to me. I'm so relieved to have him back, I almost don't notice her pulling out her phone. She starts showing me pictures, telling me to look at the nursery she's set up. She shows me images of a room decked out in baby stuff, crib, changing table, the works. Confused, I ask her what nursery she's talking about and why she's showing me this. She replies as if it's obvious, saying it's for our baby and that she's already pregnant. My brain short circuits. I know I have to get out of there fast. I try to explain to her that she's not pregnant with my child and that we've never even met before today. She dismisses my words, saying I'm just surprised, but that she forgives me. She insists we're going to be happy together. She tries to grab my arm. I step back, holding my dog close. I tell her she needs help and that this isn't real. I say I'm calling the police. She panics, begging me not to do that. She insists we're meant to be together and that she's carrying my child. As I dial 911, she lunges at me, trying to grab my phone. My dog starts barking like crazy. I manage to dodge her and keep her at bay until I hear sirens approaching. The cop showed up and took her into custody. Turns out she'd been stalking me for months, tracking my movements, figuring out my routines. They found a whole shrine to me in her apartment, along with plans to kidnap me and force me to be a family with her. She kept insisting she was pregnant with my kid, even though medical tests proved otherwise. The judge ended up ordering a psychiatric evaluation. She was committed to a mental health facility. I got a restraining order and beefed up my security. It's been months, but I still get nervous when I see someone staring at me for too long or when a fan gets a little too excited. I moved into my new apartment complex a few months ago. I'm a recent college graduate, trying to make it on my own in the big city. The rent is steep, but I managed to find a decent place in a quiet neighborhood. At first, everything seemed perfect. The apartment was cozy, my neighbors were friendly, and I was slowly settling into my new life. That is, until I met the woman in apartment 3B. Let's just call her Karen because that's exactly who she turned out to be. It was a Saturday morning when I first encountered Karen. I was heading out to do my laundry when I saw her struggling with some grocery bags. Being the nice person I am, I offered to help. Karen looked me up and down, then remarked that it was about time someone offered to help and assumed I must be new here. I should have seen the red flags right then and there, but I brushed it off and helped her carry the bags to her apartment. Little did I know this small act of kindness would open the floodgates to a series of entitled demands. The very next day, I heard a loud knock on my door. It was Karen holding a list in her hand. She greeted me by saying it was good I was home because she needed me to run some errands for her. Confused, I asked her to clarify. Karen explained that since I helped her yesterday, she assumed I'd be willing to help again. She showed me a list of things she needed from the store and even asked if I could walk her dog while I was at it. I was stunned. I tried to explain that I had my own errands to run and couldn't help her today, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. Karen raised her voice, expressing disbelief at how selfish young people are these days. She claimed that, as my elder, I should respect her by doing what she asks. I apologized and tried to explain that I have my own responsibilities and can't just drop everything to run her errands. Karen scoffed, declaring that she'd be sure to let the landlord know about my unhelpful attitude. She stormed off. Over the next few weeks, Karen's demands escalated. She'd knock on my door at all hours, asking for favors ranging from borrowing sugar to demanding I clean her apartment. Each time I refused, she'd threaten to complain to the landlord or leave bad reviews about me online. One day, I came home from work to find Karen arguing with another neighbor in the hallway. Karen was yelling that a package was clearly meant for her, regardless of what the label said. The neighbor calmly explained that the package had his name and apartment number on it, so it wasn't hers. When Karen spotted me, she called me over, insisting that I tell the man he needs to give her the package because she's been waiting for an important delivery. Sighing, I told Karen that if the package had the other neighbor's name on it, it was his. And I couldn't help her take something that doesn't belong to her. Karen gasped dramatically, asking how I dared to refuse after all she's done for me. Confused, I pointed out that she's been nothing but demanding since we met. Karen then turned to the other neighbor, using me as an example of how ungrateful millennials are. I'd had enough. I decided it was time to take action. I went to my apartment, grabbed my phone, and started recording our next interaction. Sure enough, Karen came knocking the very next day. On video, she demanded that I come clean her kitchen right away because it was a mess and she had guests coming over. I told Karen that I've told her before I'm not her personal assistant and asked her to stop asking me to do things for her. Karen got angry and started threatening me. She claimed to be friends with the building owner and said that one word from her would have me out on the streets. I calmly asked if that was a threat, pointing out that it's probably illegal. Realizing she was being recorded, Karen became outraged, threatening to sue me for filming her. She tried to grab my phone, but I quickly stepped back into my apartment and closed the door. I could hear her yelling and banging on the door for a few minutes before she finally gave up. The next day, I took the video to the building manager and explained the situation. They were shocked and apologized profusely for not addressing the issue sooner. Apparently, Karen had been causing problems for other tenants as well, but no one had concrete evidence until now. A week later, I saw Karen leaving the building with a bunch of boxes. The manager had given her an eviction notice, citing multiple complaints and her threatening behavior. As she struggled with her boxes, she spotted me watching from my window. Karen shouted that this was all my fault and hoped I was happy. In response, I called back asking if she needed a hand with those boxes. She huffed and puffed, loading her car in silence. The entitled neighbor saga had finally come to an end, and I could enjoy my apartment in peace once again.